The American Civil War of 1861 to 1865 was the turning point in United States history. In many respects, American history is divided into two time periods. One is prior to the American Civil War, and the other is after the Civil War. And the impact and influence of this seminal event in American history continues to impact us to today. But beyond the great battles, the important generals, the massive casualty figures, and the tremendous impact on the social and political life of American life, there were some other legacies as well, some of which continue to influence us all the way to today. Here are a few of them. The federal income tax. The federal income tax was established in 1862 to help pay for the war, which was the most expensive enterprise in American history up to that point. Interestingly, though, the federal income tax only lasted for 5 years to help finance the war, and then was allowed to expire. However, the income tax, as we all know, came back and was reestablished in 1913 by the 17th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Sideburns. We all know about sideburns, hair growth on the side of men's faces, but it comes from an actual person. There was a Union general by the name of Ambrose Burnside, who was well known and quite proud of the facial hair on his face, which he called mutton chops. However, as Burnside became more famous, Americans, playing with his name and his mutton chops, turned Burnsides into sideburns, and the name has stuck ever since. Hookers. We all know the slang term for prostitutes, hookers, but it actually comes, it's believed, from one person, and that comes from the camp followers of a Union general by the name of Joseph Hooker. And the camp followers, essentially a train of prostitutes, became known as Hooker's Army, and the prostitutes themselves became known as hookers. In reality, the term hooker for a prostitute had been in use since the 1830s. However, Hooker's Army and General Hooker popularized the term, and most historians believe the common use of the term dates from the Civil War. Dog tags. During the Civil War, the casualty figures and bloodshed was so high that soldiers on both sides, both Union and Confederate, began to write their names and addresses on pieces of paper and pin them on their bodies, usually on their backs. So if they were killed or maimed on the battlefield, their bodies could be identified and returned to their loved ones. As time passed, this practice became more formalized, and metal identification tags called dog tags were then issued. Memorial Day holiday. Memorial Day is officially commemorated on May 30th, although in recent years it has been the last Monday in May. This holiday was originally called Decoration Day and was a Confederate holiday originally. For the Confederacy, the casualty figures were extraordinarily high, and on Decoration Day their families would visit the fallen, clean up the cemeteries, and place flowers on their graves. Gradually, Decoration Day also spread to the north and to the west, and it came to be known more commonly as Memorial Day. But it was not until 1967 that federal law officially changed the name of the holiday. Interestingly, when it comes to holidays, for many years most southern states did not celebrate Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and the 4th of July was not celebrated in Mississippi until the 1970s. The concept of total war. Total war was an idea that was championed by Union General William Tecumseh Sherman. It was the concept that war must always utilize to the fullest the material and manpower available. There should be no pulled punches. Total war was the best way to proceed. In support of the total war concept, General Sherman is often quoted as saying, "War is hell." Well, that's not exactly what he said, and the full quote is much more revealing about his mindset toward warfare. This is what General William Tecumseh Sherman actually said. He said, quote, "I am sick of war. It is only those who have neither fired a shot nor heard the shrieks and groans of the wounded who cry aloud for blood, more vengeance, more desolation. War is hell." Unquote. Racial segregation and Jim Crow. Following the Civil War, it became the law throughout most of the United States, and particularly in the southern states, the former Confederate states, that there was official legal separation of the races. This legal separation of the races is known as racial segregation, and it applied to accommodations, transportation, even such things as drinking fountains and bathrooms. They would be separate. Most famously, in schools, the concept was separate but equal, that somehow white schools and black schools would be separate and equal in order to enforce racial segregation. In reality, the schools were definitely separate, and they were definitely not equal. It is often said that segregation started in the South after the Civil War. That's not true. Racial segregation actually had its start in New York City in the 1820s, when blacks were denied the right to vote in New York, and there were separate facilities established in public areas and transportation. However, it became best known in the South through the utilization of a series of laws known collectively as the Jim Crow laws, which enforced racial segregation. These Jim Crow laws stayed in place in the South through the beginning of the 1970s. Deadline. During the Civil War, there were prison camps on both sides of the war, both Union and Confederate. But the most infamous of all the prisoner of war camps was a Confederate camp known as Andersonville. When Andersonville was constructed, it was a wooden stockade, and they only had enough wood to build walls on 3 sides of the camp, so one side was open. They built a very low fence on that open side, and they told the prisoners that if they stepped over that fence, they would be killed immediately, that low fence was the dead line. Go over that line, and you're dead. Most language historians believe that the concept of a deadline as we know it today, that there is a due date or the last day you can accomplish something, really had its origins in these prisoner of war camps during the Civil War. Other camps other than Andersonville had deadlines as well, but Andersonville was the best known.